Okay, let's get started. Once again, welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Nick Grossman, and today's webinar topic is the amazing axolotl, Mexico City's endemic amphibian, presented by NatHab expedition leader Melissa Silva. Melissa, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you very much. A pleasure being with all of you. Very happy to share this fantastic creature with all of you. So just a short presentation on myself. I'm a marine biologist, so I'm very into like aquatic animals, mostly on the ocean, but also well, I like rivers and lakes and everything related to water. I've been working with NatHab for like 12 years now, more or less, 10 at least. And I have always found very incredible creatures along the trips that we have in Mexico. Unfortunately, we don't really see these animals that I will present in a moment, but they are in the region where we go and visit the monarch sanctuaries. Actually, I will speak about that in a moment. So I decided to present today this webinar because we just very recently, a couple of months ago, we went to Xochimilco area. I actually had a webinar about Xochimilco, so look it up in NatHab site. And there is an ajolotario. It's an area that local people from Xochimilco opened and have some axolotls or axolotls in display for the people to know. And there's a lot of biologists working on this. So I think this is something that it's important to share. It works to let you know in case you come here and you visit the floating gardens of Xochimilco, you have in mind also that there are other things rather only like the scenic area of Xochimilco. So well, um, let's begin with this. This is a very popular animal, as you know, and I'm pretty sure you have seen it like all over the place. A lot of ornaments that you can have in the topic of axolotls or ajolotes. Um, so you name it, and pretty much there's something merchandise that is in the topic of the axolots. So why they are so popular? Well, because the modern days dictates or tell us what we should learn, what we should have in our minds. But these animals, these are salamanders. Actually, they have been in the earth for around 50 million years at least. Some of the fossils are a little bit older, and what the scientists know is that they are native and they locate only on this area of the North American site. Specifically, the axolotls, they belong to a family named Ambistomatidae, right here. And they are, in general terms, they are called mole salamanders because of the features they have. The genus Ambistoma, which is where we find the Mexican axolot, is very closely related to the tiger salamander that is very common, very well known back on the States. So on this genus, specifically on the Ambistoma genus, there are 35 species located from southern Alaska, southern Canada, all the area of the United States, except if you notice on this map the Rocky Mountains here. So, well, that is because they are associated to lakes and streams more than rivers, and not so waters with not so much movements as those big rivers that we might have coming down from a mountainous area. From those 35, from 30 to 35 species of ambistomas that we have in the North American area, Mexico has 17. 17, one of them is shared if you notice on this map, the darker or brighter orange coloration on the north part of Mexico, one species of ambystoma is shared with the United States. The other 16 axolotls or salamanders are basically endemic to Mexican land, to the country. If you remember, I mentioned at the very beginning of this that we find in the area that we visit the monarch butterflies sanctuaries, we find some species that we barely see because we don't really go to look for them. And that is because they are on this area right here. I don't know if you can notice my the little arrow of my cursor here. Uh, in this area is what we find, what we call the Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt. This is a mountain range that goes west to east in central Mexico, very high lands. And here we have a lot of lakes and a lot of streams also that are, of course, tributary to those lakes. Uh, this area right here, where you can see the yellow patch, somewhere right next to it is where the monarch butterfly sanctuary is. So you can tell there are species that are endemic, that are microendemic to this specific area. So, but well, we call all of these species either ajolotes or achoques. Those are pretty much native names, Nahuatl names for this type of salamanders. And basically, all of them go through the metamorphosis cycle. They change from this kind of like feather crowned salamander to like the regular salamander shape that we know. But well, specifically the species that I want to share with you today is the Ambystoma mexicanum. It's a axolot or axolot or ajolote in Spanish. This species has a very restricted distribution area. Nowadays, is found mostly in Xochimilco Lake. This is an image of the Xochimilco area with the chinampas, with the canals in between. Back on the day, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, a little bit more, they were found all over the place in the Central Plateau, in the Mexican basin, and well, there was a system of lakes here, so um, we used to find them all around the place. As the city is growing, of course, we took all of that water to either the house consumption or for clearing the land, and now it is restricted to in the wild to two very specific areas, which is, as I mentioned, Xochimilco, and another very tiny area in the state of Mexico that is called Chalco. It's also very similar to Xochimilco, but in a much smaller scale. Um, the axolotl, the Ambystoma mexicanum, is pretty much just like all of the other mole salamanders. All of them have this robust lizard-like body that we can think of when we think of a salamander. And of course, as they are amphibians, they are not reptiles but amphibians. That means that they don't have scales on their bodies. On the other hand, they have a very smooth and basically moist skin when they become terrestrial. When they are young, when they are juvenile, they have gills. Very specifically on the axolotl, when they reach adulthood, they have lungs too, which is something that might not match in our minds because they still have like this very immature characteristics such as the gills, but they do develop adult characteristics such as the lungs. So their primary respiration is through the gills, but they can also breathe just like all the other amphibians through their skin. So that's why they also have the lungs. They have on the sides of their bodies, the mole salamanders in general, also hence the axolot, They have these coastal grooves on the sides of their bodies, and the primary use for those is to add like more area for respiration. So all of that area on the sides, of course, we have the ribs. They have bones. We have the ribs here, and they have a lot of veins and vessels, blood vessels here, to help with the air exchange, or the gas exchange in the skin. Excuse me. Sorry. The tail is pretty much like those of a fish. I actually read somewhere there that it's also called legged fish in some areas, because, well, it really resembles kind of like a fish because of the tail, but it has the legs. It's not a fish, so we won't mention that name in here. So the tail flattens laterally, so it aids on the movement, although the main movement appendages are the legs. On the legs, they have 4 toes on the first pair of legs, on the frontal legs, and they have 5 fingers, 5 toes on the rear legs. They don't have nails, although they have like these pointy like fingers. They lack of nails, and their mouth is very wide, very big. They have tiny teeth that they don't really use to chew. They mostly just like grab the food and swallow. So they also have a retractable tongue, just like the like frogs do. Being amphibians, being so related to frogs, they share the same characteristic. Another characteristic that they share with the other amphibians is that they have no eyelids. They like lack of eyelids, so they cannot like blink when they have uh, this characteristic. Remember, I am talking about the axolotl, like the Ambystoma mexicanum, the one that does not go through the metamorphosis. Other salamander species, even in Mexico, the ones that we find in Mexico, they do go on the metamorphosis, and they lose a lot of the characteristics that I'm mentioning. For example, they do get eyelids, so they can blink, but not the axolotl. Okay, and this salamander has a very poor vision. They have a lot of receptors for light in their eyes, but they are not adapted because of the conditions of their habitat. They are not adapted to see to see details. So they kind of like see lights and shades and some shapes, but they don't really see like details. So to sense from the outside, to feel the outside, to be aware of the environment, they use something that is called lateral line, that is just like a bunch of receptors, mechanical or chemoreceptors on the side, on the coast, coastal no, ¿cómo se dice? Sí, side area of their bodies, lateral lines on their bodies. So this species, I'm pretty sure you have, when you think about the axolotl, as I mentioned on the very first slide, with all the pop culture axolotls, we think of a pinkish axolotl. In reality, the native, the wild axolotls are dark, because they live in darker environments. They have to blend with the soil. They have to mimetize with the environment. So in general terms, in nature, when you have albino or white animals in a contrasting environment, they don't survive. So most of the axolotls that we see, that are either white or is the pink, or in this case, as you can see on this image, there's this other morpho named golden albino. Uh, they are like this because they were under some genetic selection. So these are basically man-made. They were selected because of these features, But in reality, most of the axolotls, most of the salamanders, as we saw in the other slide as well, uh, you can see all of them are like darker colors or paler colors that can mimetize, as I mentioned, with the environment. So they get protection from predators. The Ambystoma mexicanum, the axolot, usually length no more than 25 centimeters, which is no more than 10 inches, something like this. You can see. So they are pretty big. They are not the biggest salamander, but they are quite a good size in general terms. Um, they weigh no more than a quarter of kilo, 250 260 grams. So they're pretty much light. And something that I found to be very curious, that is common with other species that we can find both in the wild and in captivity, is that they tend to live a little bit longer in captivity rather than in the wild. There are some registers of axolot pets in homes living up to 15, 16 years of age. And then, well, we have, of course, on their laboratory conditions in which they also have them for studies. So, well, the same, they can live a little bit more than the wild lifespan. Something that I found very curious and I wanted to mention is that how to tell if they are albinos or they are just like white axolots. So I don't know if you can guess with these two photos that we have here. Something very easy to find to tell one, and this is in general with any other animal species. Check the eyes. Usually, when you have an eye that is either reddish or colorless, that is an albino animal. If you see an animal that has the white coloration that looks like an albino, but then you see the eye with color, that is just a leucistic animal. That means that they lack of melatonin, that is the pigment on their skin. So that's like just a thumb rule for you to tell one specimen from another, either if they are albinos or leucistic. So I think this was very interesting to know. So what's the life cycle of the axolot? As I mentioned, the general life cycle of any other salamander is basically the same, except that on this stage, after the juvenile stage, they reabsorb the gills, they change the shape of their body a little bit to be more reptile-like. They lose this extra piece of skin on the back and the tail, and basically they become terrestrial. That's one of the most important differences between any other salamander and the specific axolot. Um, Here on the axolot, for example, let me just go over the life cycle on specific. We have that the little tiny eggs are 2 millimeter long. You know how much is that? We cannot not even see 2 millimeter here. But well, it's something like this in between my finger. So they have tiny eggs, and they can lay from 50 to 1,000 eggs at once. So that is depending on temperature, depending on most of the times if you have them, for example, for research in captivity, depending on the size of the tank where you have it. So if it's a larger tank, they would be able to lay more eggs. If it's a smaller area, they will lay less eggs. And if they are in the wild, they also take note of the amount of predators or competitors. If there are more axolots around, they will lay a little bit less eggs. Or if there are more predators, they will try to lay more eggs just to make up for the loss. 1 week after the oviposition, the egg develops into an embryo, very tiny one still, although it's 1 centimeter, so very tiny. 1 week later, they eclode from the egg and they become the first stage, one of the first stages of the larva. Here, between larva and juvenile, they can go through several different stages. Most of the times we can differentiate the stages of the larva by the limbs. If they have the two first pair of legs, they are in a certain stage. When they have the four legs, they are like almost on the juvenile stage. So aquarists and researchers, they go over different like rules to name the different stages, because some are more like purists, and they go, no, 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 it's a specific length even if it doesn't have the limb. Some other people say no, if it has the first pair of limbs, they are in this stage and that. So well, just for general and practical terms, the larva stage can go from when they are this centimeter long up to 5 to 10 centimeters long in total length. Um, the time, it can be from 1 or 2 weeks in between stages, or even months. Once again, depending on the temperature, the external temperature, the amount of food, the amount of predators, competitors. So a lot of external factors are the ones that tell us like the time of development. The juvenile stage is when they are just about to become adults. Basically, they look like a full grown adult. And the thing here is that they don't really reach adulthood until like 6 months of life. After 6 months is when you can actually consider them as an adult axolotl. And here is where we have like the maximum length, 20-25 centimeters. So now, how you can tell males from females? Well, being amphibians, they do have sexual dimorphism, and it's pretty easy once you train the eye with a couple of photos. Actually, you can do so um, to tell males from female. On the underside of the axolotl, on the back of the hind limbs, on the hind legs, we have an opening that is called cloacal opening. They don't have external organs, sexual organs, so everything is internal, and they just have this differentiation on the cloacal opening, which is where they poo and pee and mate. So the males, since they have the testes, they have testicles, and they have like these bigger gonads, they have a couple of bumps on each side of the cloacal opening. Females don't. They are more like a smooth surface with the opening, and that's it. So just an easy way to tell males from females: check the back of the body on the ventral side, and you will see. Although if they are immature males, they can be mistaken by females. So that's the only thing that you need to keep in mind. If they are mature males, you will see the development of the testes. If they are immature, they will look like a female. So I think it's pretty easy. So why they are so popular and why everyone thinks they are so cute? I think they are cute. Well, it's because they have this characteristic called neoteny. Neoteny is basically to have baby face like, to have characteristics, immature characteristics that uh, tends to give us the clue that this is a young organism. For example, excuse me, in mammals we have neoteny, of course, with babies. The best example, they have like these round faces, big eyes. They look like adorable. If you think about cubs, if you think about I don't know, wolf cubs or baby foxes, you can think on the big eyes and the big ears, the tiny snout. So they look like adorable. You feel like you want to take care of them. So basically, for mammals, what I have read is that this is an adaptation for adults to take care of the young, of the next offspring. So this is an adaptation that maybe mammals had in order to survive. But with amphibians, with the salamanders, with the axolotls, we don't really know why they have this characteristic, since they don't really take care of the offspring. They lay the eggs, the offspring eclode, and they live free lives on their own. I'm sorry. So what happens here? What we know now, well, researchers have found that it seems an adaptation to avoid the waste of energy. If the salamander has the perfect conditions underwater to survive there, to mate there, they have a lot of food, they have partners, they have protection, they won't change into this adult like features. On the other hand, they also found that they lack of a hormone that stimulates the thyroid gland. So this hormone is associated to the trigger of metamorphosis. So they don't have this hormone, and in general terms, during their evolution, they had the perfect conditions to stay in the water and do everything in the water. They had a lot of food, protection, they have partners there, so they didn't really got the necessity of going outside to lay the eggs by the ¿cómo se llama? Coast of the river, the river line, or to mate, to look for a partner away and walk distances to find a partner or find food. So, well, so far that's the reason that we have for the neoteny on axolotls. There are more researchers on progress in this topic, but so far those are like the most strong clues that we have for this. Um, but despite the baby face and the cute characteristics, axolotls are actually predators, and they are very good predators in both in, of course, captivity and in the wild, because basically they eat everything that they can get in their mouths, or anything that they can get in the mouth. So they can eat egg from other ¿cómo se llama? Animals. They can eat, of course, worms, any type of worm that is associated to the soil in underwater. Insects, any kind of insects, any kind of crustacea. For example, in captivity, they are fed with brine shrimps, but those are marine species. In the wild, in the freshwater ecosystem, they will feed another type of crustacean, mostly amphipods, that are found also in these areas. So the importance of the axolotls being predators is that they regulate the density of these invertebrates, of the worms, of the insects, of the other crustaceans that are on the area. But they also contribute to the control of the population that they prey on. For example, the tadpoles or the fish fries, the fish babies, or the eggs, they are also controlled by the predation of the axolotls. So, in general terms, axolotls are very important for the ecosystem. Well, one, because they are, of course, part of the food chain, but being able to move closer to land and being in the water, and then like walking outside the land to move to another area, or swimming like for longer periods of time to move, they exchange matter and energy between land and water. They also help with the nitrogen and the carbon cycle that is in the water, like under the water, that is very important for the aquatic plants. They are part of the food chain in a lower level, being prey for other animals such as birds or mice. In this case, for fish, also exotic or native. And they are biological indicators of the ecosystem health. So, as any other amphibian, they are very, very sensitive to changes of the temperature, of any physical or chemical changes of the environment, and hence the pollution of the area. So, if we see a decline or an abundance of amphibian, in this case of axolotls, we know if the quality of an ecosystem is doing good or doing not so good. And something very important is that they are biological controls. That means that they control population, other animal populations that are harmful for humans. In this case, very specific case, what they have seen, they control mosquitoes that can be vectors for for diseases for the humans. So they are important in terms of ecology and also for human health, as you can see. So what's important in terms of culture? The axolotl is related to a god named Xolotl. That is means actually monster god or dog, monster god or dog god. And this is a twin brother of Quetzalcoatl. If you remember, Quetzalcoatl is the feather snake, so it is represented mostly like a snake, dragon-like snake, but instead of having scales, it has feathers, and it actually has a crown of feathers. So if you make that, if you remember that image, you can make a resemblance of the axolotl. So they both have like this feathery like crown on the head. But also it's the god of twins, because well, the Quetzalcoatl twin is the god of the ball game that was so popular in Mesoamerican back on the day, and among others. Something that I found very interesting is the explanation that our ancient cultures gave to the creation of the axolotl, the existence of axolotl. So let me just tell you a legend. It's the story time. So back thousands of years back in Teotihuacan, the city of gods, when the gods just created the world, it was all dark. There was no sun, no moon, no stars, and they were in Teotihuacan just like hanging out and thinking like, well, we should have a little bit of sun so we can see each other and we can enjoy the world. There were several gods, among them Xolotl right here in red, Quetzalcoatl here in green, Ecatl, the god of wind, here in purple, um, the Tecusistecat here with this golden face and blue arms, Tecusistecat, and Nanahuatzin here with the ear lobe enlarged. So all of these gods were just, among others, were just talking like, what should we do? We should do this and that. And then Quetzalcoatl and Iecatl came with the idea of have a sacrifice, that a god had to be sacrificed in order to be reborn as son, as the son. So for that reason, for that matter, Nanahuatzin here, that is the god of diseases and malformations and what other, yeah, like all the rotten things. He was the god for all these disgusting things that we have, and he volunteered. He was the first volunteer to offer himself to become the son. Seeing that and being Tecusistecat, this one here, the god of beauty and the god of all the vanity and all these beautiful things. He said, like, no, well, I want to become son too. I want to be just as bright and beautiful as my fellow god, Nanahuatzin. So they both sacrificed themselves, and they became two sons. So we had two sons at the very beginning of the times. Seeing this, Quetzalcoatl was like, this is not right, this is too bright, this is too hot, we need to have one of the sons to turn off. And for this meaning, he threw one rabbit to the Cusistecat, the pretty god, the one that was kind of like jealous or had the envy of the other god, and sacrificed himself on the second place. So by throwing the rabbit, we had the sun and the moon. And in Mexico, we always say that we see a rabbit on the moon. I think back on the States, you see a man on the moon or something. But well, when you come to Mexico, try to find the rabbit on the moon. It's like very characteristic. So well, after throwing the rabbit to Tecusisteca, they were just the sun and the moon were static on the sky. So the gods were like, well, this is like very boring. All day is daylight, and we see like moon and the sun at the same time, and this is not like dynamic. We need movement. We need the time, the life cycle to start working. I know what we should do. The Ecatl said, the one in purple here. We should sacrifice ourselves in order to give power to the world, to the sun and the moon, to move and to create day and night. And here is when Charlotte said, like, what, you're crazy? I don't want to sacrifice. I don't want to die and then reborn and being in this cycle of death and rebirth. So he decided to run away. He first run and tried to hide within some maize crops, but he tried to emulate the corn and the maize. Being the god of twins, he had two corns, two what's the name of that? Elotes. I forgot the name in English. But what, two mazes on the same plant. Of course, it was very notorious that was not a plant; it was Charlotte. Then later on, he moved to an area with a lot of agave, with a lot of cacti plants. Once again, when he transformed himself into one of these agave, there were two agaves together. So it was very easy for the other gods that were just chasing him to track him and see him. So eventually, the last place that he had to hide was underwater. And he transformed into the axolotl. And being the twin brother of Quetzalcoatl god, he was very similar to Quetzalcoatl, the feather snake, as I mentioned. So pretty much that's the short story, the short version of this legend of how the axolotl was created, and well, the sun, the moon, and the beginning of the time. So this metamorphosis and this ability to survive and to move from one stage to another, avoiding death or running away from death, is that something that we can link with today's information about the axolotl. So, Ambystoma mexicanum, the species, and other species of salamanders, actually is not the only one, but several others have the same abilities of regeneration, and they can pretty much regenerate any part of their body. That's something very, very amazing that the researchers have seen. They can regenerate, of course, something as simple as skin. We do regenerate our skin almost every day, but they can also regenerate bones, bone tissue, muscles, uh, even the heart, their brain, the spinal cord. So all of these characteristics or these abilities that they have, of course, they are imprinted in their genomics, and they are under study nowadays. This is something very cool because uh, what the researchers have found is that despite having like 10 times more genes than the human, they have like 3 million of genes or something like something uh, absurd huge. As they have these replicas is when there can be some mutations, but they do have some systems to control these mutations to avoid, in this case, cancer specifically, just the growth of these crazy cells without form. So despite having such a complex genome, they can regenerate any part in matter of days, and they can regenerate it without the mutations that are proper to this replication. I don't know if that makes sense. So, well, this is just like a general cycle of how they can regenerate, but I like this image better, so I had to put this one too. The the fantastic thing here is that pretty much on the very first half on the left of the image is what we have, humans have. If we lose a limb, or if we lose a part of our body, we just have the epidermis covering like the wound, the area, and making this scar. Scarification, something like that is called. Uh, Pretty much like this area here. I don't know if you can see it. One second. I know what I can do. Up to here is what humans have, more or less. So from here, uh, the amazing thing of the axolot is that they can have something called, this one here in blue, blastema tissue. The blastema becomes kind of like a new tissue area with stem cells, with cells that are able to become anything. They are, we call it, si es regenerative, well, in Spanish is totipotente. Like they are able to become any other specific cell that is needed for the moment, and hence they become tissue for that matter. So I'm gonna use red now. The blastema tissue forms after the coverage of this wounded area, and then we have the stem cells having some differentiation, becoming either finger cell or muscle cell or bone cell for the finger, or maybe nerves for the missing part and the fingers, and then they start just multiplying in the proliferation phase, this one right here. And as you can see, they basically have like this tiny little hand growing from the wounded limb. So this is something very complex in terms of genetics, in terms of neural organization, and this is something very amazing because we can find some applications for this to humans. Researchers right now are looking for the either proteins or enzymatic process, whatever, that is similar in humans as in salamanders, in axolotls, just to try to replicate this type of regeneration. So I know you are very nerd, just like me, and you love reading other scientific articles. So I strongly recommend you to read. They are open. They have an open access for the public to read these two. Those are, I think, one of the most well, kind of like easy and informative articles that we can find about this. So you can have a screenshot here, or later on the is the recording when we publish it, you can have the screenshot. But very, very interesting and well, deeper explanation of this. But well, we can also face some threats. Any species in this world are facing threats. Axolotls are not the exception. The axolot right now is facing several different threats. One of the most important, on my very personal consideration, is the habitat loss. It's a lot of pressure that Xochimilco specifically is having. The other little tiny lakes around the area in Mexico City, they are on the same conditions. But the sad thing here, for example, is that we used to have, in 1998, we used to have 6,000 axolotls, 6,000 individuals per square kilometer in Xochimilco. When they did another census in 2014, they found only 36 axolots per square kilometer. So you can see it's a decline, and a very abrupt decline. And well, people is living more and more in Xochimilco. Of course, it's a touristic center. As the city is growing in Mexico City, we need more water. So the pressure on the habitat is one of the worst in my very personal consideration. But also we have other threats that the axolotl is facing. The introduction of exotic species, in this case, very specific tilapia fish, carp fish, they feed on the axolotl in very several stages of their lives. Maybe they don't fish when they don't feed on them when they are adults, but they do feed on them when they are, of course, eggs and all the larva stages until juvenile stage. So carp and tilapia fishes, they are one of the worst exotic species that are in many rivers and lakes, not only in Mexico, and are introduced species, and are they are damaging the ecosystem. Of course, unfortunately, pollution, fishing. Believe it or not, the axolotl is consumed as food, still in traditional areas, and well, they fish it from the wild for this purpose in some cases. And the other very bad is the threat that they are facing is the illegal trade. um, People is hunting them or fishing them from the wild areas to sell them as pets. So if you are interested, it's not forbidden to have them as pets, at least not in Mexico, but they have to come from an aquarium, from a specific area where they are being on their reproduction for this purpose. So if it happens that you want to have an axolotl back home, just check that it comes from an authorized aquarium. But well, of course, we also have good news. There's a lot of efforts for conservation. Nowadays, it's becoming very popular. Uh, Here we have the 50 pesos bill, where the new one from 2 years ago, where you can see the Xochimilco area, the chinampas, and the axolotl, of course. So that gives the species kind of like a boost for conservation. People get interested in the species, and they get involved a little bit more on the habitat and the species conservation. Also in Chapultepec Park, in Xochimilco area, and other parks in Mexico City, we have different little either museums or axolotariums, and they either are just for exhibition for the people to know the axolotl species, or for reproduction and later reintroduction. And something that I found to be very interesting is, let me just show you here a video while I explain something. In the Biology Institute of the UNAM, they have this specific axolotarium in which, of course, they are running several tests, one second, several research studies, but not only on the axolotl, but also on the ecosystem. You can see here the students and the professor going to Xochimilco, working on the chinampas to protect some areas and make or bring back the axolotl in the natural habitat. So I found this to be super important and cool for you to know, because there is a program or a project named Adopt Axolotl. So you virtually can adopt an axolotl. You donate a certain amount of money, and you can get some information, some specific, like a certificate or so, and then you are supporting this specific group of people, this specific research in the Biology Institute of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. So just go on, look in your Google site, search for adoption, and you will find like the first or second that is on UNAM. Just look for the logo of the UNAM University. So I think that's it. Thank you very much. Maybe we have some questions. So we have sometimes I think sometimes, yeah. Nick, back to you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Melissa. Before we start the Q&A, I'd like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the questions panel in your go-to webinar control panel. And if you're interested in traveling to Mexico with NatHab, you can visit our website at nathab.com for trip details or call our adventure specialists at 800-543-8917. For now, we welcome your questions. So please enter those in and we'll pass those along to Melissa to answer those. Melissa, the first question we've received is whether they have nictitating membranes on their eyes.
No, no, just like other amphibians, they have like just the eye and then an epithelial coverage, but they don't really have the, if I remember correctly, the nictitaria epithelium, or it's kind of like an eyelid that can move open and close, pretty much like the one that the sharks have, and they cover and protect their eyes. So in the case of the axolotls, they don't have this type of coverage. It's just the like the eyeball.
Excellent. Thank you. So next question, given the low numbers left of the species, why is fishing allowed and why is there not more protection for them in the wild?
Yeah, fishing is not allowed actually. So the
Hmm.
fishing that is being made to capture them is illegal too. In Xochimilco, there are still a lot of people living by the day. So they basically have their crops in there and they fish tilapia fish from the area. And if it happens that they have an axolotl bycatch, they don't really consume it, but they might sell it to others. So it's illegal to fish them, to target them as a fishery. But if it's a bycatch, well, they might keep it. And there is protection. There are fines. It's protected by federal laws. There is a normative in the federal level. So it is what is a federal felony to catch an axolotl from the wild. But well, just like in any other topic like this, people find a way to do it without being punished for the action. So nowadays, what people, for example, the students and the professor from the UNAM that I showed you is doing is that they have like monitors every other day, once a week, and they just go and they try to be in the area while the people is doing their stuff, and just kind of like environmental education in a soft way, not with the punishment of the law, but just telling them, well, this is not good because of this and that. What if you do this? What if you help us doing that? So there is like another type of reinforcement for the protection, or uh, ask the researchers are asking for protection in another way rather than just forbidding the fishing or forbid to be in Xochimilco. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, yes. Thank you for providing that additional clarification and explanation. So next question, we have a couple more minutes and a few more questions here. Please feel free to send more in if you like. Is someone who was recently on NADHAV's monarch butterfly trip and they saw the axolotls and it was so interesting. And they're wondering how many there are approximately now, either in the wild or captivity.
So in the wild, in Xochimilco specifically, I read the last estimation in 2020 was like 1,100 or 1,100 in the wild in Xochimilco area that is shrinking, and it's a small place. In captivity, there are thousands, like tens of thousands, because we have them as pets in certain parts of Mexico, but we also have them as subject of research all around the world. So there are Ambystoma mexicanum, the species that I spoke about. We have them in the Kentucky, in the University of Kentucky, for example. See, then we have it in Canada as well, in Europe, um, and well, many other universities here in Mexico, in central Mexico mostly. So in the wild, the Ambystoma mexicanum is around 1100 specimens, individuals, and in captivity, well, tens of thousands. But something to notice, to for you to know, the axolotls that we see or we can find while traveling on the monarch butterfly area is not the same species. It's actually another species that can go on the metamorphosis, the metamorphosis. So the axolotls that you might see or we might find, actually there's in Angangeo town where we stay a couple of nights, there's a new axolotarium, a new axolot area, and they have only one couple of Ambystoma mexicanum that they get from a university in Michoacan. The other axolots, the other salamanders, are juvenile stages of salamanders that eventually will develop into the terrestrial or land salamander. So it's sometimes we make this confusion that, oh, we see axolotls, the one that never goes into the metamorphosis, but no, that specific one is from Xochimilco and some areas on the northern part of Mexico, but it's only four species in Mexico that has this feature.
Understood. Makes sense. Thank you. So another question we have is if they have pain nerves, or
If they
if
have what?
they feel, if they have nerves that can feel and perceive pain. You had explained a bit
Yes.
about their ability to regrow.
Yeah, they are just like any other vertebrate. They have bones, they have connective tissue, they have ¿cómo se llama? Nerves, the nervous system. So they do feel, they have the mechanoreceptors for touching, but they also have the pain receptors. So sometimes it's very controversial to have, like in this case, ¿cómo se llama? Ah, in laboratory. Well, experiments. The experiments in laboratory, because well, they get mutilated, they get an amputation. What I read is that they do have some anesthesia on them. So it's kind of like humanitarian the way they are working with these animals. But they do have nerves, they do feel, they can perceive cold, hot, like changes of temperature. They can perceive the changes on the movement of the water, the current, the water current, and they can feel if they are among other axolots, they can feel the other axolots.
Makes sense. Thank you. Unfortunately, that's the last question we have time for today. It was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much, Melissa. I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments.
Well, thank you very much for watching here today. Just like I always say, just learn more. Try to do your own research. I left out a lot of things that are so important, so interesting. So just check what are the newest news about the axolot and how you can protect them or help the conservation back home. Sometimes we think we cannot do better for another species that is not in our close environment, but you can by supporting like these programs, these research programs from universities, or check on your local universities, or just work with your local species of axolots. You have local salamanders, you have salamanders that don't go on under the metamorphosis. So do your own research from your corner of the world, and just keep in touch with nature. Thank you, Nick.
Great advice. Thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in. Please join us next week for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website and YouTube channel soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Thank you so much, Melissa. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great
A
weekend.
pleasure. Bye bye.